Ever feel like you're just drowning in like a sea of all these responsibilities? It's like every single decision, every single problem just lands right on your shoulders, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So today's deep dive, I think it might give you a little life raft.
Uh-huh.
We're going to be exploring something called separation of tasks. It's a technique rooted in Adlerian psychology.
Right.
Helps you figure out what you should actually be handling to sort of regain that sense of control.
It's a fascinating concept.
Right.
Adlerian psychology, really emphasizes the power we have to make choices, but it also makes you think about limitations and focusing that energy on what you can actually influence.
Totally. And so to guide us through all of this, we're using the work of Teru Nakashima, a Japanese psychology counselor.
Yeah.
And in the writing, there are some incredibly insightful examples.
What's really compelling about Nakashima is they emphasize practical application. Like they even have something called the Separation of Tasks Notebook. It's a tool that helps you actively sort through those anxieties and responsibilities that just feel like clutter in your mind.
So like, if you're feeling super stressed, you write it all down.
Exactly.
Then you just label it as like my task or someone else's task.
You got it.
Does that actually work? Does that actually clear the mental fog?
Absolutely. It's powerful stuff.
Wow.
Think about it. A lot of our anxiety comes from feeling responsible for things we can't control.
Right.
So when you separate those tasks, you can see what's actually outside of your influence.
Okay.
And realizing that is freeing.
But I feel like some people would hear that and think, wait a second, that's just an excuse to avoid responsibility.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a really common misconception.
Right.
Separation of tasks is not about ignoring your duties.
Okay.
It's about recognizing where your real responsibilities lie and putting your energy where it actually matters.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how this could be helpful because I think a lot of us struggle with overwhelm, juggling everything life throws at us. But tell me more about this notebook idea.
Sure. So you open your notebook and you just list everything that's stressing you out, everything big or small.
Okay.
Maybe it's a work deadline, a fight with someone you love, even a messy kitchen. You look at each thing and ask, is this really mine to solve, to manage?
So, for example, that messy kitchen, if you live alone, that's obviously on you to deal with.
Right.
But what if you have roommates who never clean?
Then you'd say that talking to my roommates about cleaning is your task.
Gotcha.
You can control how you talk to them, but you can't make them change overnight.
So it's about taking responsibility for the things you can control, like communication, and just letting go of the things you can't, like your roommate's messiness.
Exactly. And that changes how you feel.
Yeah.
Instead of feeling helpless and resentful, you actually feel empowered.
Okay, I like that.
You focus on solutions, not problems.
But what about times when we have to help others, even if it's not our task, like morally?
That's a really important question.
Yeah.
This is where Adler's concept of social interest comes in.
Okay.
It basically says that we're all connected and we should help each other.
So it's not about isolating ourselves or not caring about other people.
Exactly. We're all part of a bigger picture.
Okay.
And we can't fix every problem, but we can choose to do good things.
So it's more about figuring out where your energy can actually make a difference.
That's it.
Okay, I'm seeing how this all fits together.
Yeah.
We're not ignoring responsibilities. It's more about figuring out what we can actually handle.
Right. And Nakashima actually has some great examples that show how this works in real life. Want to hear some?
Oh, yeah. Let's get into it. Let's see how separation of tasks plays out.
Okay, so let's start with a familiar one. Parents freaking out over their kids' grades.
Oh, yeah.
Nakashima talks about this mom who's stressed about her son's exams.
Ugh, I know that feeling.
He's not studying and she feels like it's all on her.
I think any parent can relate to that. You just want your kids to do well.
Of course.
So how does separation of tasks help here?
Well, Nakashima says that the mom's job is to create a good environment for learning, offer help, maybe even help him make a study plan.
Okay.
But it's not her job to actually make him study.
So she's making sure the conditions are right, but ultimately he has to make his own choices about studying.
Right. And this is the interesting part.
Okay.
Nakashima says that the mom trying to control how he studies, the nagging, the lectures, it might actually be making things worse.
Really? So instead of pushing him towards the books, she should be pulling back.
Kinda, yeah. She should be more supportive, not controlling.
Okay.
Instead of, why aren't you studying? She could say, what's making it hard to focus? Can I help you make a better study space?
That's a big change, and I bet it would change how they interact.
Definitely. It's about giving him power, right? Like
Yeah.
trusting him to figure out his own learning.
Yeah.
Adler thought kids naturally want to be capable and independent. But when parents try to control them, it messes with that.
So by letting go a little, the mom could actually be helping her son take more responsibility.
Exactly. It's subtle but powerful.
Wow.
And it shows something important about separation of tasks.
What's that?
Sometimes the best thing you can do is step back and let people make their own choices.
Even if they mess up.
Even then.
I love that. It's like we can't always control what happens,
Nope.
but we can control how we react to it.
Exactly.
And I'm guessing this applies to way more than just parents and kids.
Absolutely. This is just one example of how separation of tasks can make things less stressful.
Okay, so we've seen it in a family, but what about at work? I bet things get complicated there.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay, so we've seen it in a family, but what about at work? I bet things get complicated there.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Think about a boss dealing with, like, an employee's mistake on a really important project. Like, a deadline's coming up, everyone's stressed, and then boom, huge error.
Oh, I can feel the tension already.
Right. It's easy to just freak out, especially if that mistake has big consequences.
Totally.
But separation of tasks can actually help.
Okay, how?
It can, like, de-escalate things, lead to a better result.
Okay.
The boss's job is to see the mistake, help the employee fix it, and make sure it doesn't happen again.
So instead of yelling, the boss could be like, okay, we have a problem. Let's figure this out together. What do you think?
Exactly. It becomes about solving the problem as a team, not placing blame.
Right.
And that way the employee can actually learn from the mistake and be part of the solution.
It's interesting because I think our instinct in those moments is to just take control, you know?
Yeah.
Like assert your authority and make sure it gets fixed ASAP.
I get it.
But this is saying to do the opposite, to empower people and share responsibility.
It is, and it's not just about being nice or avoiding conflict.
Right.
It's about realizing that people will own up to their mistakes and learn from them if they feel respected, even when they mess up.
Okay, that makes sense. And I'm starting to see how this idea can be used in so many situations.
It can.
What other examples does Nakashima have?
Well, they talk about friendships, which can be tricky, especially when someone's going through a hard time.
Yeah.
Like, let's say your best friend just went through a horrible breakup.
Been there.
Right, they're heartbroken, eating ice cream, the whole deal.
I think we all want to fix things for our friends, you know? Give advice, maybe even some tough love to get them going again.
It's natural, but Nakashima suggests something different.
Oh.
They say that your friend's job is to deal with their own emotions, at their own pace until they heal.
Okay.
Your job as a friend is to be there for them, create a safe space.
So no unsolicited advice. Just listen and be empathetic.
Exactly, because it's their journey, and trying to control it or rush it can actually make things worse.
Okay.
Sometimes all you can do is be there and let them know they're not alone.
It's like that saying, people don't always need advice. Sometimes they just need a hand to hold, an ear to listen, and a heart to understand.
That's perfect, and it shows how important boundaries are.
Right. Respecting our own and other people's.
Yes, and speaking of boundaries, this could be really helpful for those tough conversations about, like, shared responsibilities in a relationship.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Nakashima uses the example of a wife who's frustrated because her husband doesn't help around the house.
Ooh, I think a lot of couples deal with that.
Right. She's doing most of the work, feels overwhelmed, and he doesn't even notice.
Yeah, it's easy to get resentful when you feel like you're doing everything.
Definitely. But instead of letting it build up, Nakashima suggests talking about it.
Okay.
The wife's job is to explain what she needs, not by blaming him, but in a calm way.
So she could say something like, hey, I've been feeling overwhelmed with all the housework. Can we talk about how to share it more fairly?
Exactly. That's how you do it with separation of tasks. She's owning her feelings and saying what she needs, but not trying to control him.
It's starting a conversation, letting him understand her side, and then he can decide how to respond.
Right, and this goes for other stuff too, like if someone's anxious because their partner hasn't proposed.
Yeah, the whole waiting for the ring thing, that could be really stressful.
Definitely. And Nakashima says, in this case, the woman should look inward.
Okay.
Her job is to figure out what she expects from marriage and why she's anxious.
So instead of dropping hints, she could just talk about their future.
Exactly.
She could be like, hey, I've been thinking about where we're headed, and marriage is important to me. What are your thoughts?
Perfect. She's owning her desires, communicating clearly, but not forcing anything.
It lets both people make their own choices.
Yes, and separation of tasks does this a lot. It shifts your perspective.
How so?
You become more proactive, focus on what you can control, instead of trying to manipulate or force things.
I like that. It's really interesting.
And this idea goes beyond romantic relationships. Nakashima has examples for friendships, work, even just being part of your community.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's hear them.
Let's start with friendships. Imagine a parent who's worried about their kid, like, not having friends at school.
Oh, that's tough.
Right. They see their kid struggling, maybe even getting bullied, and they just want to fix it.
Any parent would want to protect their child, try to make it better.
Of course, but Nakashima says we have to separate tasks here, too.
Okay.
The parent's job is to be there for their kid, give advice about social stuff, maybe even practice different situations with them.
Okay.
But it's the child's job to figure out how to make friends, deal with conflicts, all that.
So the parent gives them the tools, but ultimately the kid has to find their own way.
Exactly. And this can be hard for parents, especially those who really want to shield their kids from pain.
Yeah, I get it.
But by stepping back, they're actually helping their kid become stronger and more independent.
And I bet this works when you're trying to help a friend who's going through something tough, like losing their job or dealing with a health issue.
It does.
You can be there for them, but they have to go through it themselves.
Right. It's about that balance between support and boundaries, and it applies to work, too.
Okay.
Think about a coworker who always dumps their work on you.
Ugh, I've been there.
It's so annoying.
It is, and it's hard to know how to say no without causing drama.
That's where boundaries come in.
Okay.
Your job is to protect your time, which means saying no, nicely but firmly, to things that aren't your responsibility.
So instead of getting passive-aggressive, you could say something like, I know you're busy, but I have a deadline too. I'm happy to help with ideas, but I can't do this for you.
Perfect. You're setting a boundary but still being helpful. And this works when you feel pressured to do too much. At work, at home, anywhere.
So we've talked about family, work, friends. What about being involved in your community?
Nakashima has an example for that, too. Imagine someone volunteering for a cause they care about.
Okay.
They're putting in a lot of effort, but they're not getting the appreciation they think they deserve.
That's tough. It's normal to want to feel valued.
Absolutely. But here's where you have to ask yourself why you're volunteering. Is it because you truly want to help? Or because you want recognition?
If it's the second one, maybe it's time to think about your expectations.
Exactly. The people you're helping, their job is to receive the help, not to thank you in a specific way.
Right.
Volunteering is about giving without expecting anything back.
That's so important and easy to forget, especially with social media and everything.
It is, and separation of tasks can help with that.
Oh,
it
yeah.
makes you focus on the act of helping, not what you get out of it.
It's about doing what's right because it's right, not for the recognition.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm ready for one last scenario.
Picture this. You're at a community cleanup, feeling good about helping the environment.
Okay.
You're picking up trash, planting trees, the whole deal. But then you see other volunteers littering.
Oh, come on. I don't want to say something. Tell them to be more respectful.
It's tempting to step in, right? But Nakashima would say, focus on your own tasks.
So just keep doing my part, be a good example, and enjoy the experience of helping.
Exactly. You can only control yourself, not other people.
And trust that the organizers will handle any problems.
Right. Let go of the need to control everything and just focus on what you can actually do.
This separation of tasks is really about changing how you see things.
It is.
It's about being aware of what you can and can't do, and then focusing on the things you can actually influence.
And that brings us to something really important about separation of tasks.
What's that?
It's about letting go. Letting go of the need to control, letting go of the need for praise, letting go of things that aren't your burden to carry.
It's not about setting strict rules.
Nope.
It's about being aware of your own limits and what you can actually do within those limits.
You got it. It's about finding that balance between responsibility and acceptance.
Between taking action and knowing when to surrender.
Beautiful.
This separation of tasks idea, it's not just like psychology, right? It's like a whole philosophy.
It really is, if you think about it. It's not about being passive or avoiding stuff.
Right.
It's about taking charge, making choices, doing things that actually matter.
So it's not saying this isn't my problem.
Yep.
It's more like, okay, here's what I can do, and this is where I stop.
Exactly. You can't control everything.
Right.
But you can choose what you focus on, and that can be powerful when you feel stuck.
It's like picking your battles. We only have so much time and energy.
Exactly. We can't fix everything.
Right. So self-awareness is really important here.
Absolutely.
Before you can separate tasks, you have to know what you want, what you believe in, and what your limits are.
You have to understand why you're drawing those lines.
Yeah, like what's really important? Where do I put my energy? And what do I just let go of?
That's a great way to put it. It's about making choices that match your values.
And I imagine that's not always easy.
It's not. Letting go of control is hard, especially when you really care about the outcome.
For sure.
It takes time and practice, and you'll mess up sometimes. You'll fall back into old habits, try to control things you can't.
Yeah.
But the important thing is to notice it and try again.
So for our listener who's feeling overwhelmed right now, juggling everything, what would you say to them?
I'd ask them, what's one thing you can let go of today? Maybe a task you've been putting off, a worry you can't stop thinking about, even a judgment you're holding on to.
It's like creating space for yourself to breathe.
Exactly. And when you do that, you might feel lighter, more at ease.
And that's what I love about separation of tasks.
Yeah.
It's not just about being less stressed. It's about living a better life.
It is. It's about realizing that your power comes from choosing how you respond to things, not from controlling everything.
It's that balance between action and acceptance.
Yes, and I think we all need to hear that.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all this with us today. I've learned a lot about separation of tasks.
It was my pleasure, and remember, listener, you have more power than you think. Choose wisely, be intentional, and don't be afraid to let go.
That's a great reminder. So until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep separating those tasks.